Hi folks, it's Paul Dresden, and here's my commentary before the video. What's happening in our country when the government is apparently keeping a closed eye on potential terrorist organizations right here in our own backyard? Wake up, America. We've been so dumbed down over the last 20 years that we can't even recognize a threat to our way of life when it's looking you right in the face. Watch the following video and understand that we are in a transitional phase here in the United States. It's now come down to the point that any Christian pointing out this issue is being labeled as an Islamophobic and a racist. Friends, we have to turn a deaf ear to those idiots out there telling us that we're racists. Pointing out the obvious threat is not racism. It's called being aware of your surroundings and recognizing a threat when you see it. The majority spoke in this last presidential election voting for Donald Trump. We're fighting not only in other countries to keep our way of life, but now fighting the same fight in the court systems here in America. The enemy is not only on the outside, but now on the inside. It has infiltrated our government to the point where it's become a policy that even on a state level, government is dictating issues of national security. Watch the following video on some of the Islamic training camps inside the United States preparing for a jihad against all non-Muslims in America. If you think this is a joke, take a look back at history when the Jews in Europe thought Hitler and the Nazi Party was a joke. Friends, history repeats itself if you don't learn its lessons of the past. Watch the following video and share it with your friends and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.
Frightening examples of Islamic extremism right here in this country. Thousands of radical Islamists and so-called Islamic villages have been set up across the country. Now, look at this map. It shows the extensive reach from Los Angeles to New York, groups involved in guerrilla war training, imams calling for violent jihad, and instituting Sharia law. Here now to discuss this threat in our very country is Ryan Morrow, a national security analyst for the Clarion Project, dedicated to exposing the dangers of Islamic extremism in America. Ryan, good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
I was watching you and Bill O'Reilly talking this week about this very issue. Your report is so absolutely disturbing because there is so little discussion of it on the airwaves, in newspapers, magazines across the country. I think people sense what's happening, but they don't have anything comparable to the knowledge base that you've assembled here on this threat within our own country.
Right. Viewers can go to clarionproject.org and see some of what's going on in their state. We have a section on our website called Islamist Organizations in America, referring to the radicals. And I think the fundamental issue here is that we've heard so much about Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and we focus on the individuals that are setting off the bomb. You have to focus on the ideology as a whole. If you're calling for instituting Sharia or you're preaching anti-Americanism, you're creating the foundation for all of that to happen. You're part of the same problem.
You know what's interesting? President Obama today dismissed radical Islamists, which he won't even use the phrase, and said it wasn't an existential threat, dismissing what has been more than a decade of combat in Afghanistan. The Taliban emerges the victor, whom we had destroyed at the outset of that conflict. The ideology which he ignores is exactly what makes it an existential threat, and he dismisses it with a wave of his emperor's wand, or whatever you may call it. It seems not only irresponsible, but purposefully duplicitous.
Well, what's frustrating for me is that now virtually everyone is using these terms in Europe, in the Middle East, and no one's getting offended. There's no backlash. The argument in favor of this type of vague terminology is that you don't want it to appear as if we're waging a war on Islam and the entire Muslim world. What we say will be misinterpreted, and you don't want that backlash. But look at our press. Look what moderate Muslims are saying. They're saying we're fighting the Islamists. What's the Muslim Brotherhood call themselves? Islamists. So they're using the terminology. Why can't we?
And the question would be, why do we have to defend our use of any language? Free speech is a right in this country. It is not in Europe to the extent it is here. Free speech is fundamental to the American experience and to the American culture and our Constitution. The group, CARE, they style themselves as a civil rights organization. What are they in your judgment?
Well, in the judgment of the Justice Department and the Muslim Brotherhood, as written in their own documents, this is an entity of the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood. Specifically, what the Brotherhood set up was called the Palestine Committee. It was a secret section to advance the Hamas agenda through the media. And the FBI wiretapped some of the founders of CARE at a Muslim Brotherhood meeting in Philadelphia in 1993. And you can read these wiretaps, the transcripts online. And they were specifically talking about using deception in order to advance the Islamist cause. And here's the ironic thing about that. They were saying, we're Islamists, we're fighting for the Islamist cause. And now CARE says to the media, you can't use the word Islamist.
And by the way, they have succeeded in stilling the voices of so many media organizations, news outlets, because they are litigious and because they have been working diligently to effectively silence an independent press in this country. Hancock, New York. Talk about that town in New York and what you have found there.
This is really amazing. There's a radical cleric in Pakistan named Sheikh Jilani, and there's videotape of him explicitly saying, I'm setting up these training camps around the United States, including this place called Islamburg in Hancock, New York, where the headquarters is, for guerrilla warfare training. And I had a law enforcement source give me a tape of that guerrilla warfare training happening at Islamburg. They say they have 22 of these, quote, Islamic villages around the country. We identified one in Texas last year.
Let me ask the director to take this video full, if you would. And I'd like to see that opening shot in that video, because it is really quite something to see the name of this place laid out on that sign. Islamburg. It couldn't be more specific, could it?
No, and this is basically to set up a no-go zone. They are isolating themselves. They're essentially creating a state within a state, and they're very radical. Their leader said that Jews are examples of human Satans and that the Jews engineered Pearl Harbor to make us go and fight Hitler.
Incredible. In this country, in 2015, we're going to be continuing our discussion with Ryan Morrow. We'll be bringing you the reports of the Clarion Project throughout, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks for bringing this to the public's attention.
Thank you.
The country owes you a real expression of thanks. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. There are over 1.3 billion adherents, and it's also thought to be the fastest growing religion in America. One of the most common questions I get when I speak to audiences around the country is, what % of Muslims in America are radical? And the Pew poll in 2007 actually provided some staggering numbers about that.
In a hair-raising number, the Pew Research Center reports on a new poll that as many as 1 in 4 young American Muslims condone suicide bombings against civilians, at least sometimes.
Nearly 25% of Muslims, 25 under 30, found suicide bombings to defend their religion as acceptable.
So you're talking about just about 200,000 folks who believe in suicide bombing. What do you make of this, Steve?
Well, I think the numbers are absolutely frightening. Unfortunately, the mainstreaming, quote, American Muslim leadership has been in denial.
What's happening? Where's the disconnect? What's the influence there?
The influence is basically political Islam, which is you have sermons that are not being given about the love of God. They're hearing about every plight to blame the West. And in exchange, they have nothing to offer other than hate.
As we move further and further away from September 11, 2001, as we remain safe during that period, there are going to be an increasing number of people who either don't see the threat as clearly, or their psychological makeup is going to want them to wish it away.
It is definitely here. I don't want to overstate the problem, but there is a danger of understating the problem of homegrown Islamist terrorism. And the fact is, we have now had a series of cases that have thankfully been broken.
But yes, 7 people have been arrested in the Miami area. Officials say the plotters were in the early stages of planning an attack on the Sears Tower in Chicago.
They hoped for their attacks to be, quote, just as good or greater than 9/11.
Police arrested 6 men and charged them with planning to attack the Fort Dix Army base.
This is a new kind of terrorism. It is not only coming from outside the United States in, but it is also growing inside our own country.
Time magazine says Al-Qaeda was planning a cyanide attack, which could have killed thousands.
From what I last heard, the U.S. government has stopped over 31 attacks against the U.S. since 9/11.
These homegrown terrorists may prove to be as dangerous as groups like Al-Qaeda, if not more so.
You've seen the Torrance, California case where they were in the operational stages of completing planning to attack U.S. military recruiting stations and then conduct a massacre at a synagogue in West Los Angeles. They were 60 days from their target date, and really all they had left to do was to start killing.
Make no mistake about it. We dodged a bullet here, perhaps many bullets.
Within a few months of that, you saw the plot to attack the PATH trains that run under the streets of New York City.
A terrorist plot in the early stages has been broken up. It was allegedly a plot to blow up one of the commuter railway tunnels running from New Jersey to New York under the Hudson River.
The thinking within that conspiracy that they would actually be able to collapse the tunnels, flood part of lower Manhattan. Within the same time period, of course, you have in Great Britain the 7/7 bombing, the 7/21 bombing, and the British planes plot, which was to blow up a dozen airliners over Atlantic routes with American passengers headed for the United States.
The intelligence suggested that this was to be achieved by means of concealed explosive devices smuggled onto the aircraft in hand baggage.
This was intended to be mass murder on an unimaginable scale.
If all of these attacks were prevented, and you walk away saying that somehow the threat has passed, we're no longer in danger, I'd like to look at the analytical tool you're using. The threat is certainly there.